everybody, and welcome to another episode of the PokerNews podcast. We have got a big, juicy show for you today. I'm your girl, Sarah Herring, joined by Chad Holloway, who is swimming in his upstairs tenant's fish tank, as well as Jeff Platt, who is swimming with the sharks in all of the drama that never ends, of course. We never like to see the drama end, but we do, of course, have some big drama that did end this week, which we will want to jump right into. We've got Doug Polk on the show this week talking about the end of the Doug versus Daniel challenge. Now, Jeff, you've been right there following all the action the whole way, doing some juicy post-match interviews.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the end of this match.
Yeah, 25,000 hands have been completed. That's 36 sessions. That's about 3 months. This challenge of 200, 400, heads up, high stakes, no limit Texas Hold'em is over. Doug Polk is the winner. Doug Polk beats Daniel Negreanu by a sum of $1,201,807. A very impressive performance by Doug Polk. He was able to pull away in the end. This match had its fair share of roller coaster rides, its fair share of drama. I think by the end of it, it ended cordially. It does seem like Doug and Daniel are friends. Doug's not just doing our podcast, but he did Daniel's podcast as well. The guys talked. They had even a quote unquote study session together before their last round of the high stakes feud. And that's it. It's over. I'm curious to see what Doug has to say to you, Sarah, about his future in poker, but it seems like he's at least due for a bit of a break as far as the playing is concerned. Props to both of them for just putting on an incredible show. I know we were able to run multiple streams to thousands and thousands of viewers. The interest was certainly there. Props to Daniel Negreanu for showcasing his heart and just his competitive nature. I think he's become a tremendously better poker player, which is saying a lot because it's not like he was in a bad spot to begin with. And then Doug Polk, just absolute badass, absolute heads up crusher. One of the best to ever do it. So major congratulatory wishes to him.
I was really, really impressed by watching a lot of the interviews and things that he did after the challenge. I think it's definitely a spot where if you would have asked, a month or two ago, we would have been expecting the victory lap to look a little bit different, if you will. But, I think them burying the hatchet, it feels, as an industry, we talk about this a lot, that I think we're trying to grow up sort of. I think we're maturing in some ways. And, after talking to Doug, I did feel very much like the burying the hatchet of this long-standing feud was sort of symbolic of, us as the poker community moving forward, growing up, moving on. Of course, it was a want for me, but this interview I thought was really, really fantastic. And if you check out the video version on YouTube, I also included links to the Dat Poker podcast, as well as the video which Doug released about his thoughts on Daniel, which there's a lot of content out there, I think, right now. If you are interested to get even more in depth on either strategy or the total opposite side, get more into depth on how the whole feud started, etc., be sure to check those out. And without further ado, I say let's just get right into it. Here is the Doug Polk. I am joined by Doug Polk, formerly Doug Polk Poker, now Doug Polk Vids. Very excited to get you on the show, Doug. Pretty much anytime I can get a Doug on the show, I am very thrilled. And you have been making the circuit the last week. Busy guy.
Yeah, so obviously the challenge wrapped up last Wednesday, and I've just been so focused on winning and studying and practicing and playing my A game that at the conclusion of it, I felt that there were a lot of things to say and a lot to talk about. And so I figured, what, might as well do the victory lap. Let's go on some podcasts and talk about things that happened. And it's I'm excited that it's over, and I think we have some cool stuff to talk about.
I'm super excited. There's many questions. I'm definitely not alone in having many, and we will get to some of the user-generated questions. But I I very first wanted to, because I sort of just got done, I edited together a little series of clips of Daniel more or less, losing his mind in some post match interviews, which was really fun. And it definitely got me thinking a little bit about some of the things that he said. And then in watching one of your last videos, which talked about, sort of your overall thoughts on Daniel's game. One of the things that you had mentioned was that you thought he really, opened up his game and was willing to put a little bit more on the line as the challenge progressed. And it seemed to me that Daniel really seemed to think in the end he was playing like the shittiest, worst poker ever. So I wanted to see if you could sort of, for us out there who are not on the level, like, can you sort of explain or, reconcile these two different perspectives?
Sure. So when you look at Daniel's style, I think that he tends to lean a little bit more conservative. And you're gonna see that, I think, from a lot of people that are used to playing live tournaments or are used to playing in maybe some softer games, or they have more of like more of a live poker background that it's not quite as aggressive, it's not quite as fierce as a lot of the online games. And I think that when you play in those types of games, maybe with a lot of weak players for a long time, I think that it's going to kind of change the way that you view the game, and it's going to make you sort of default towards a style that is probably a little bit less aggressive. I think there's a lot of different examples of that when I look at live poker players. Typically speaking, they tend to be under bluffy and usually a little bit over foldy. That just kind of tends to be stylistically where they're at. So I think for Daniel to go from a lot of those kinds of games, with his main game, of course, being live tournaments, and step into a heads up game, you're going to have to start to override a bunch of your defaults that have really served you well over the course of your career, and then input instead this new baseline of, we're going to get stacked a bunch, we're going to have to run it a bunch, we're going to have to play some really loose pots here. And I think that transition is just a very difficult one for people to make. And I think that's why when you look at typically the people that have been the most successful in Heads Up No Limit, it's been more or less guys that came up in the online streets and kind of cut their teeth in those games, compared to someone that's making that transition. So as for that transition of his game specifically, I think early on Daniel played sort of in that vein, and then he started to open it up as he went along. I think somewhere around 15, 16, 17k hands at that mark, he realized, if I want to have a chance to win this, I'm going to have to play significantly looser. And it might not even be that he thought that was the best way to play, but it's just when you're stuck 15, 20 buy-ins, I think maybe the lowest 12 buy-ins, something in that vicinity, maybe 25 at the peak, you're going to have to play more big pots in order to give yourself a chance to actually win. Because if you just play normal, especially Daniel's sort of normal style, it's not very likely that he has a big upswing. And one of the good things about playing loose and spewy is that there's more chance that you can go on a big run. So Daniel had side bets on himself, of course. So it kind of changes the game, right? It goes from just, we're not playing strictly what wins the most dollars this hand. We also have to think about these sort of, side bets and this metagame of, well, who wants to get stacked more or less or whatever. And there was just such a drastic shift in his game. There was a stretch, I think around the 13, 14k hand mark to something around the 15, 16k hand mark, where I didn't stack him for 2k hands. I think we played two or three sessions where I did not stack him one time, right? And then some of those sessions down the stretch, we had some crazy swings. There were sessions that someone got stacked 30 times in one of the sessions down the stretch. It was just, chips were flying back and forth. So I think that when he realized he had to loosen it up and he had to try and make stuff happen, I think that he started to play a game that I think, maybe didn't feel as good to him, but I actually think overall was much stronger. It was much more aggressive to deal with, and it kind of gave me some problems that I hadn't really had to deal with for most of the challenge.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned in one of the videos I was watching, I think the same one, looking at Daniel, was that sort of your theory when looking at poker, something you're considering all the time in your own personal poker philosophy, is, am I bluffing enough? And I do think, like, obviously me, I mostly am covering, tournament poker and live tournament poker specifically. And it's just such a different ball game, such a different thought process. So you're talking about, someone transitioning from this live, maybe like MTT or live, like 9-seated hands, moving to heads up. what about for you? You've obviously, it seemed like a pretty seamless transition to go from playing heads up to like winning bracelets in like MTT tournaments. So is it if you're more comfortable in this gambling space that's just a much easier transition to make?
So I think there's a lot at play there. These are such different game types, right? Of course, they're both poker. You know, you have the live aspects, which a little bit more live reads and timing and that kind of thing going on. And then online, of course, you don't have those aspects, but it's a bit more technical. People can dissect your game a little bit more in depth. But in both games, it really boils down to one simple thing, and that's, of course, luck. And I'm not sure if you knew this about me, but I am very lucky. And that skill set, it just transitions over very nicely to live poker.
You and Tom Brady, both, obviously.
Both of us.
Well, it's I just have so many things, but you mentioned that you guys both had quite a lot of side action riding on this bad boy, and I saw in your Twitter that you maybe actually even like made some bets, couple $100K that you didn't even realize that you met, and there was a big lesson in these, you know, to bet on yourself all the time. So kind of, can you tell us, I know you can't tell us like the specifics of all of your side action, but can you talk a little bit about, you know, what it means to make decisions when you have all this other side money going on?
Definitely. When I look back on my career, I've seen, you know, I've had a lot of different opportunities to really bet on myself. And usually I've taken them. And sometimes it's been on the more aggressive side with what I've been willing to do. But the bottom line was, in any situation where I have a lot at stake, and this goes for anyone out there, you know how much effort and time you will put in, right? You know your own abilities. So when you look at a situation and you think, wow, I think I'm very likely to win here, I'm going to work extremely hard, and I think that this is favorable for me, you can bet big there because you are going to take it seriously, you know. And if you know you won't, then vice versa. But the point is, when I think about all the times in my life that I really was successful, it was, well, you know, most of the times in my life at least, it was usually, oh, this is a spot where I think I'm a favorite. I think that I'm getting the appropriate odds here. I think I'm winning here. I'm going to make a big bet on myself because I believe in myself and I believe in my ability to perform at a high level. And you know what? If you lose, tough shit, that just happens. I've had the good fortune of, in most of my big spots, having run quite well. It's a short list of times that I can think of where I didn't, you know, convert those spots into wins. I think about this day I lost $1 million to Isildur Online. That's probably on the list. And then there's maybe some final table spots in some tournaments I played along the way where it's actually a good story. I think I'm trying to think if I've told this one before. I'm not sure, but basically I was at one of the biggest live 100Ks ever, and it was at the Bellagio, and I think we got down to 7-handed, and it was me, Jason Mercier, Dan Smith, a few other guys I can't exactly remember, and people started talking about chopping because there was a lot of money. I think it was 3 or 4 million up top, and I had a very big piece of myself, and I just looked at the lineup and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm a favorite here. I'm not going to chop. Fuck that shit. I'm going for the win. And, you know, maybe in retrospect, I should have used that as leverage to get a good deal, you know, right? But I just wasn't coming at it from that perspective. I was coming at it from the perspective of, these guys want to chop, at least most of them. They want to chop. This is a lot of money. I'm totally fine if I brick 7th here and I'll still win, you know, however many 100K. And then I'm playing for first, and these guys can all chop up the ICM value. You know, that's the way that I felt in the moment. And maybe that is an example of betting big on yourself. And then someone opens, I have 20 bigs and I jam ace 5 suited or ace 4 suited, whatever, a wheel ace, suited ace. And then Dan Smith wakes up in the blinds with queens and they send me packing. And then they sit out and everyone goes, we're making a deal, right? Yep. And so I just had to stand up and go take my 7th place payout while they all chopped up my money, basically. But you know, most of the time that I bet big on myself, it's worked out. It's helped me on my journey. And I think that the real takeaway here is, you never know how serious other people will take your bets, your money, your time. You never know how serious other people will take that, but you know yourself. And so I think with that information, you should use to try and make the best decision that you can.
I mean, I'm surprised that you got really very many people at all to bet against you in this spot, considering sort of the general consensus in the poker community was that you were at least maybe like a 4-1 favorite to start. That being said, I think especially I'm guessing that a lot of the listeners listening may not even understand that, while you were certainly the best in the world at Heads Up No Limit, at one point you've taken a large step away from poker. You've played basically no poker for several years. To jump back in some ways, you were really starting over, right?
Yeah, the line was 4-1 when it opened, and I think it mainly stayed around there. There was one gambling site that when they posted it at evens. I forget if it was Betfair or if it was Bet Online. Well, one of the gambling sites, and the money obviously poured in on my side, and they had to shut down the market. And then on top of it,
Like Robin Hood.
on top of it, they accidentally paid out the halfway point to the Doug Polk bettors.
Stop.
Yeah, so there was just a free roll going the other way if that happened. So that was a bit of a disaster. I forget which site that was. But anyway, talking about the odds and kind of with where my game was at, I think that, yeah, I think, I'm trying to think about how to phrase it. Basically, I think when people were betting, they weren't really betting on my abilities so much, I think, because having been at the top and knowing what tools are out there and just knowing the network of people that I have and knowing how serious I take what I do, I think people just knew I would be good. Whether I, how good is that? Is it top 5 or 10 in the world good? Is it very good? Is it where I think that the general consensus was just Doug will put a good team together. He would work hard. He's going to be good. I think that just more or less where it was at. I think the real question was how good is Daniel going to be? Because that's much less clear, right? This guy's never played a heads up challenge in this format before. He played a long time ago, doesn't have the experience, hasn't played a lot of hands here. What's his team going to look like? What's his learning process going to look like? What's his game going to look like? I think that there were mainly question marks on that side. So, when I look at the odds, and this is something that I sort of had to weigh when I was betting myself was, well, where do I think Daniel is going to be, and how confident am I in that? And that's so tough to say, right? It's so tough to say, oh, Daniel will be good or won't be good or whatever it will be. I think typically there's going to be an adjustment period for someone changing game types where they're going to be significantly less good. That made me feel good about the odds that were 4-1. If you look at the end at my win rate in EVBB, the odds, if that was my true win rate, right? I think it was about 9.4. I think that you got roughly 6-1 on me. So if my win rate at the end was my true win rate, then you made a plus EV bet, not plus EV bet betting on me, but not by a huge margin, right? So I think that really the conversation was a bit more about where is Daniel going to be and how is he going to approach it, and I think that's kind of what we saw in the odds.
Well, that's one of the things I also wanted to ask you about, because it's something you mentioned is, how important building your team is, and that maybe had you built Daniel's team, you might have built it slightly different, but, obviously, like, not trying to throw any shade on him or his team. And clearly he was improving a lot during the challenge. So, but can you tell me a little bit about how you structured and built out your team? Or are they kind of, you haven't been in poker for a long enough time that it feels like this was probably, you really had to put something together. It's like a little fight team, but poker fight team.
Yeah, it was my corner. I had my coach. I got everyone in the back. Someone with the gloves out there while I'm punching them. So yeah, it was interesting putting together a team for this. The first thing I did when he accepted the challenge was I just reached out and talked to everyone I know. Hey, who's good? Who's basically just reach out to everyone I know. What's going on in Heads Up? And then just kind of started to go down the avenues towards finding the right people. I was very fortunate to find a couple of coaches that are extremely good. Well, it was much more, the two players that I'm talking about are Frab XD and Button Clicker. They're two younger Scandi guys. They're not well known in poker. These are not going to be people that you saw win a bracelet. In fact, one of them's not old enough to play in events. So these guys are just amazing though. They're such smart, amazing poker players that it was really cool getting to be around people like that, especially because when I think about my Heads Up career before, it was more, I had some guys that I could talk strat with and bounce ideas off of. I think one of the main guys like that was Ryan Fee, but more or less it was Doug decides, because there wasn't solvers and I had a team of people I was staking and I was the guy at the top. So it was, this is the strategy, Doug decided, we're going with this. And so it's weird now being the guy that's, hey, I'm a blank slate, please teach me stuff, But getting to learn from those guys was amazing, and that was a fantastic opportunity. And then on the tech side, just the thing about poker is it's just so. I mean, the game's not solved, right? It's not pure solved, but there are solutions and estimations to what is correct. And so just by having someone run tests on what's the best size on this flop, what's the best size on this flop, what's the best size for this turn, what is the best size for this pre-flop range, what range should that be? Basically, you can have people really boil down to some specifics. What is the optimal size if you're going to use either multiple sizes or one size or whatever your strategy is going to be? And I think that you just need to have some guys that are very proficient on the tech side. And I really managed to get that. I'm not sure if you guys know, Primordial AA was the guy kind of heading it. Caleb Bannister was the guy really in there, just every day prepping the ranges for me. Some hot, fresh, piping hot ranges. You wake up, time to hit the sims, got some fresh ranges. Tough times in the online poker streets. But anyway, that was big as well. I had another group. We decided a few weeks in the challenge that we would allow tracking of frequencies. So I put a post on Upswing. I said, all right, Upswing members, I need people that are going to count out turn delay C bets, who's in. And then about 15, 20 guys, more people offered, but 15, 20 guys more or less count out every hand. So I got all of his stats in all these situations. So I could compare that. It was a full team effort, and I also trained a lot on. I used GTO Trainer out of the gate with simple GTO Trainer, and then towards the end I used a lot more Lucid GTO, which is another trainer. But basically, training tools where you just play against the bot and see how you're doing, and you can see your mistakes and basically improve that way. But yeah, this was a full team effort. I had people that were helping me every step of the way. I had a really good system of guys that. They had pieces, so they made some money, but they basically, I had a good team of guys that really wanted to help out and did a great job, and you need that today. And then the other part of the question was talking about Negreanu's team. He went a little bit of a different direction that I would have felt comfortable going. I think that you really needed to have someone that is a current heads up crusher. I think that's kind of important. Obviously Frab XD was more the coaching role, and he doesn't play the highest stakes, but he's played a ton of heads up no limit in the last several years at a really good win rate. And he's also, worked a lot with Button Clicker, who's maybe the best player in the world right now. He's beaten a bunch of people for a lot of money. So when I'm looking at my team, I want to have some guys that are out there doing it, that are out there just crushing people. And I think that if he had maybe picked out one or two coaches that were currently at a top level heads up no limit, I think that probably would have sped up his improvement in some different areas.
Which you mentioned that they had pieces. That's one of the questions, like a user, generated question was sort of, how did you, that's obviously personal, which you don't have to answer, but it seems to me like a good way to incentivize your team and your coaches is to just make them a part of, making
For sure.
it profitable for everyone.
I mean, to be totally clear, people mainly had side bet pieces, or they had side bets on me winning the challenge, right? Obviously, the action itself, I wanted to have as much as I possibly can, but there was a lot of action here. There was a lot of opportunity for betting. There were a lot of people that wanted Negreanu's side. I think that there was a prevailing theme of people thinking, well, 4-1 is just such good odds, and it's heads up, anything can happen. Seriously, that was a thought process, and I think a lot of people kind of bet just knowing that Negreanu would be likely the worst player, but you're getting 4-1. I think the only issue with that is when you're looking at heads up, it's just so easy for edges to become really big if one player becomes substantially better than the other player. And Negreanu did a really, really good job closing the gap and picking strategies that were quite good in a lot of spots. And I would say that I think Negreanu played substantially better than what I would have anticipated. And he's still, at the odds he ended up losing at, would have been 6-1 underdog. And this would be in a spot where I think he played very well. So it makes you think, what are the odds truly like if someone isn't really good? It can very easily be 10, 15, 20-1, or someone could be drawing super, super thin. So I guess the main thing when you look at heads up is every hand you have to make decisions. And so if one player is better, that edge just gets compounded. Every hand you're making better decisions, and that can end up being a lot of money.
And that's why most people are not playing high stakes heads up. And it's interesting to me just to see, you know, I of course, lots of people I know are outside the poker world. And I think lots of people have, you know, grand visions of what it looks like to be a poker player. And I always have to just explain to people, like, it's really hard work. It's just work also, like everything else. It's work. You have to study. And I mean, Doug Polk is doing solvers and playing against bots. And yeah, it's no matter what, it's work. I thought this was an interesting question. So Alex Huang said, if present day Doug played peak and boss online heads up no limit against WCG Ryder, Doug, in a similar challenge, what do you think would be the odds?
Well, it's really tough to say what the odds would be. I have to think about that. But my current version of my game is obviously substantially stronger than that, because at the time it was what, again, as I said earlier, it was what does Doug think is best? Yeah, Doug decides. We're not going to cross-check the solver on 5 flop sizes. We're playing Doug thinks it's this. So Doug thinks it's this is a lot worse than a computer saying it is this, right?
Yeah.
So you think about all these different spots. I think a lot of my solutions from back in the day, I shouldn't say solutions, but guesses of what solutions would be, ended up being very good. Open size, I think, was pretty much on the money. I think 3-betting size, all that stuff was pretty much on the money. 4-betting size, I think I was pretty on the money. I think post some of the spots I used overbets were pretty good. I think a lot of the game that I played before was, you know, would transfer over to not much EV loss. But then there are spots I did play that would be a lot of EV loss. For example, the solvers really like using a 1.5x turn bet when you bet the flop. So basically, if the big blind calls an open, calls a flop, bet and checks, when you do bet here, you bet really, really big. You're basically keeping it very polarized. And you're saying, hey, if you call here, you're going to face a lot of big river bets. And that's very difficult for the big blind to defend, because typically they don't have as many of the sets and 2 pairs and that kind of thing, because they flatted pre-flop and then they didn't raise the flop. So basically that spot you get to actually, and you know what's funny? I used to do a little bit of that back in the day. So I didn't do a ton of that, but I did a little bit of that. And I'm glad to see that ended up being in the right vein. But anyway, the point is, in spots such as that, I would have been losing a lot of value back in the day not using those sizes. And then also, I think a lot of the ideas that I had sort of on flush boards were incorrect. I typically like to bluff with some of the wrong hands. I think some of the sizes I used in those spots weren't correct. I mean, there's so many aspects that things I was doing wrong. I could make a very long list of things I was doing wrong. So what would the edge be between those players? I think it's very likely that Negreanu's game today would have been better than me then. I think that's pretty safe to say. Negreanu's strategy in most places is much more based off of what's optimal, whereas than what mine was at that time. And so you kind of always have to think about, when you're thinking about how good someone is, you think about it, you know, where was strategy at the time and what resources were available at the time. There was no solvers, at least publicly available. There wasn't there weren't these really easy tools that you could use to learn. So you had to do it the old fashioned way and bust out the notes and decide what you're going to bluff with. Okay, on this spot, we're going to use the ace-5. There was lots of that kind of stuff going on, right? And it was good and bad. It was a blessing and a curse. I think for people that really did care about trying to bluff enough and trying to bluff the right hands, it was a big advantage, because you were figuring stuff out other people weren't. But then, of course, the problem with it was you would pick out bad hands all the time to bluff with. So, you know, poker's come a long way, and I think that would be reflected in the win rates that you would see in that match.
Well, this is another question, which I think is sort of on the same vein from All Hands Below. Where would you rank yourself now today in the heads up no limit world?
Yeah, it's tough, because I don't want to. So one thing that's
you don't want to
kind
have
of
another challenge happen.
I know, we have to really be careful. I don't like when people declare things with no intention of backing it up whatsoever. So I'm going to declare something here with absolutely no intention of backing it up whatsoever. And I think it's pretty safe to say I'm in the top 10 heads up players nowadays. I think that's a relatively safe bar. Is it possible I'm top 5? Maybe, probably not. But I think top 10 would be relatively safe. I don't think that there's a lot of, even when I look at some of the top guys online right now, I don't think that they're as strong as people might think that they are. I think that there are a lot of people that get their names by proclaiming themselves the best. I think Limitless did that on one of Joey's podcasts. But a lot of people will play Limitless. You know, it's not, he's so sick that no one plays him. He's so sick that kind of everyone plays him, which usually means you're not the sickest. Or I look at players such as I think Linus is, I think, generally more respected than Limitless, but he's not played a lot of guys in a long time. He's played some people he's not had the best results against. What's his win rate like? You know, do you see mistakes in some of his hands? Sure. So I kind of think it's less cut and dry than a lot of people really think. And I also think that, you know, I think a lot of games or sports are like this, where there's sort of the public's view of who's at the top. And then there's sort of what the experts who are in the game, what they think. There's obviously when, you know, let's say you're talking about basketball and someone wins defender of the year, or, you know, basically the best defender in the league. Well, I bet if you asked actual NBA players, hey, who do you hate having guard you the most? They might have a different opinion than what the fans saw or thought, right? Maybe they're not as flashy. Maybe they're just more solid. So the point is, it's not always as clear cut as a lot of people, I think, would think. And the other thing is, I'm honestly just a bit surprised that there are so many games that run in today's ecosystem at all. My opinion was, when I quit the game of Heads Up No Limit in 2014, 2015, it was kind of dead. There weren't really matches. It was basically me and my crew had all the tables and all the sites, more or less, and then other people didn't. And that was kind of it. You know, if you wanted to take a shot, Doug, you'd played my third highest stake or something, you know, and that was kind of it. Whereas, you know, and you know, nowadays there are a lot of guys that are grinding it out. I don't know if this challenge got people excited. I don't know if, you know, maybe people aren't worried about bots with a lot of these guys, because I think it's pretty clear a lot of them are not botting. I'm not sure what it is, but there seems to be a lot more high stakes heads up action going on today than there was even back in 14, 15.
I mean, you retired, so everyone was like, cool, spot open, seat open, let's go.
Seat open.
Okay, I wanted to ask a couple more questions. Todd Flanagan said, Negreanu made a comment, with all of the intricate pre-flop material, the game really now starts post-flop. Do you think that's true broadly, or more just a function of this challenge?
Well, it really depends on the game type. I think with Heads Up No Limit, it depends on how you want to define this, because if I get a flop and I'm going to bet it, I know what my standard sizes are there, right? And I know what kinds of hands bet or not, because I've drilled it so many times. Is that the game starting? Oh, I know this hand is 32% bet, and I know that it's for 125% pot. Is that the game starting? You see what I'm saying? It's so arbitrary. On the turn, I know what kinds of hands barrel. On the river, I know what kinds of hands barrel. Where's the game starting? So it becomes less defined as the streets progress, because maybe on the pre-flop, I know something is 38%. Flop, I know it's probably 40. Turn, I think it's probably 75, and maybe on the turn it's 60. But it's blurry where we want to call that the game starting. So it's a really hard question to answer. Where does the game start? I think with something such as tournaments, where I always like using this analogy. Tournaments are more of an artist painting a beautiful painting, whereas I feel cash games are more of a science. Because in tournaments, there can be so many unique situations. You know, you have a few spots at the table that are really bad. Now you're playing versus a strong player in a weird spot. Do you really want to lose your stack here? Or maybe there is weird ICM considerations, or maybe there's some sort of live read. If you're at a live, there can be all kinds of things that you might want to paint on your beautiful painting. But Heads Up No Limit is just a science. I can put in what your range should be, put in what your sizes should be, or put in what your sizes are, and I can run what I'm supposed to do against it. So I think that if you want to view the game as when predefined solutions are no longer helpful, or way less helpful, then you're going to really have to find something like live deep stack tournaments, where that will be substantially less like that. But even then, still, there's going to be open ranges that are correct. There's going to be theory ranges that are approximately correct. There's going to be all kinds of post-flop stuff that people can use too. So I think if you want to view it in that sort of way, it's going to be tough, because, you know, it's going to get more and more solved, and it's going to get more and more, hey, the guys that aren't doing this are the losers. It's just the reality. It's not good. I'm not going to sugarcoat it that it's good for the recreational player, that it's good for people that don't want to have to put in the hours grinding this really boring stuff. But the reality is, the people that put in those hours to learn, and, you know, use training resources like upswingpoker.com, those are going to be the people that really end up printing the money in these spots. That's the reality of the game. And I think we're going to see it head more and more in that direction.
That makes sense. I wanted to ask just a couple things from, you were just on Daniel's podcast, the Dat Poker podcast, which I was excited to see. But it was, as I think we've all expected, you guys said you know, buried the hatchet, which like, wah, okay, fine, but that's good for everyone. You know, I'm sure it's good for the world for you guys to just move on. But there was a point in the show where they were talking about this period of time where Daniel had been tanking, presumably. We talked about it on our podcast. It seemed very clear that's what was happening. And he said in the podcast, he goes, my mouse wasn't working. It really wasn't. I'm so against tanking, but my mouse wasn't working. But then just a couple of maybe 30 seconds later, he said, oh yeah, like I really wanted to tilt you actually. And because you were doing this thing, then because you were making a certain decision, then I decided to do this. And so then I was like, okay, so what do you like? Was his mouse not working, or like what happened?
He was very clearly trolling about the mouse. It was more of a, my mouse isn't working. See this mouse? See how it's lit up? Not plugged in. It was more one of those than it was. He actually thought that, or he was actually claiming that he wasn't tanking. Yeah, I mean, I think about the tanking thing. It was a silly response to what I did, because what I did was strategically a part of the game. What he did was just a bit over the line, in my opinion. I'm glad it didn't end up becoming a significant chapter of the book. It was more of a blip, because things have been going so smoothly up to that point. I think that it was, sometimes stuff's going to happen. You have 25K hands, emotions are going to get hot. I didn't want to lose. I just had a huge losing session. He didn't want to feel he was getting outplayed in a spot he hadn't got to study. So emotions are going to run high. I did find it kind of funny that in his Monday interview that week, no one beats me limping. No one, I crushed this. No chance. He has no chance. And then Wednesday, 20-second stall to learn about it. It was a funny 180, but I'm glad that, we ended up moving past that and just playing normal and kind of playing it out. It was tough for me. I didn't want to start limping. The thing is, limping is, first off, slightly more optimal, right? So it's a little bit more EV. But the bigger concern, of course, is I had just lost 400K. My lead was only 1 million, and I have a lot on the side. It's not worth me, just refusing to do the thing that makes more money. And I need to play strategically the way that makes the most sense for me to win. So it wasn't great for me. And then I'm sure he didn't want to tank 20 seconds to open, but he felt that I had prepared for something that he didn't have time or didn't know was going to happen. And so I kind of get where he's coming from. I still think that to tank his button opens was just a little disrespectful. When it was 2 tables, just tanking both down to 20 seconds to open the button. It really was. So I'm glad we straightened that all out. And yeah, going on this podcast is interesting. It was cool getting to talk to him and the other guys about some spots and some of the stuff around the challenge and kind of the way that it all went down. I think for me and Daniel at this point, I think that we have buried the hatchet. I just can't really. I have nothing but respect for the guy, for him to basically just jump in and play a 200, 400 heads up no limit challenge where the other guy is going to be good. I can't really be mad at him for other stuff. It just seems kind of silly. This guy put his money up where his mouth was and played this challenge. So I don't expect us to see eye to eye on a lot of issues, but as far as, Dan Negreanu, the poker player, I have a lot of respect for him. And it was, I think, good to kind of move forward from those days.
I think that makes the biggest difference, especially for men. I think respect is really the baseline, and if you can have that with each other, it's okay, fine. Like, we can, clearly you guys disagree on lots of things, but gaining respect for each other, I think, is very powerful. And that's one of the things that you said in the interview, was also that you really never expected to actually play this challenge. I mean, obviously you would be confident in it either way. And he had said that he mostly would have wanted to do it to promote Gigi, which really he wasn't able to do. I was wondering if you could go back, if you would always, clearly you won a lot of money, so that's great, but if you would do this again. It was like 3 months of your life, and it turned out it was during a time where mostly nobody had anything going on, so that was great. But would you do this again?
Well, it was actually 6 months of my life, because we agreed to the challenge in August and it's February. So it was more than that. It was 3 months of playing, and it was 2 or 3 months of prep, which I prepped very rigorously for and spent a lot of time. I would definitely do this again. Let me rephrase that. Hold on. If it was 6 months ago, I would have done what I did because it was just a big win on many fronts. It was obviously a win in the challenge. Winning money is great. It's on the side bets. It's a win for my brand. It's a win for Upswing. It's a win to, I think it's a win for the online community that really thinks that, online poker is a lot tougher than I think maybe people would anticipate. And, I think with COVID and sort of where I was at with everything, it made a lot of sense to do as well. There wasn't a lot else going on. And then kind of additionally, I had a very long break from having had to play any poker. And so it was a good opportunity for me to see, okay, can I play moving forward? What do I think? How do I feel about this? So I think all those things considered in, I think that, I would definitely have done it again at that time.
Well, this is sort of the perfect segue as, we wrap up the interview. I wanted to talk about, what's kind of next for you, what's up. Obviously, I even just saw on Twitter today that Jason Les is coming into sort of a CEO role in some kind of like a crypto exchange, I think. But obviously crypto's exploding, which is great. But what can we expect to see from you in the coming, close future?
Yeah, so just talking about Jason for a moment. Jason Les was someone I worked with a lot in Heads Up No Limit. He just became the CEO of Riot Blockchain. Basically, they're more of a mining operation than an exchange, but I think that they have they're in a lot of different stuff basically to do with Bitcoin, most specifically. Which is, I mean, I couldn't be happier for the guy. He's a hard worker. He's a good dude. I'm It's a little weird to see him as the CEO of a company that's worth a couple of $1 billion. That's a little bit strange, but I think a lot of the guys that I got to work with along the way are very successful at a lot of things that they do, and it is cool to see the crew, the evil empire as we were once dubbed, come up and get to crush it in so many different ways. And I'm happy for Jason, I'm happy for a lot of my friends. I think that it's nice to see that a good group of smart guys managed to be successful. And yeah, I'm pumped for him for sure. As for myself, it's a little less clear cut where I'm headed. I think at this point in my life, I have to make some decisions about what I'm going to do. I had some different stuff on the table that didn't end up panning out, and then I don't think poker is really going to be where I'm going to be spending my time moving forward. I'm not. I'm leaning towards not doing a lot of content online as well. Look, like some of the good moments were great in the YouTube streets. I really enjoyed some of the funny shit that we did. We're buying billboards and trolling people and stuff. That was awesome. But the grindy nature of it, where okay, we need to get an episode up. I don't know. I don't know if I can be fucked to deal with that just constantly. It's just such a grind. I've made 500 to 600 videos on YouTube over how many years it's been, 4-ish years. I have no clue at this point. And 50 to 100 were great. And then the top 25, I just loved every minute. But then there was just so much. And pocket jacks on the turn here, I just can't do pocket jacks on the turn. Please, no more pocket jacks on the turn. Or when I was doing a news video on something that I didn't really care about, or the problem is the lows of content creation are, and I'm sure you know this, they're quite low. So I don't know if that's the direction I'm really going to head in. I'm going to get back to kind of working on some just like my personal health and focusing on working out and eating well again now that I kind of can chill out a bit and just focus on myself. And then I think within the next year or two, I'll figure out my next step. Of course, I'm still gonna be running Upswing and maybe some other business ventures I'm debating in mind, but nothing to announce yet. So excited for what the future may hold, but not exactly sure where that is today.
It's fine. You just won like 1.2 million, so you can rest on your laurels for just a little bit. And I did notice in the podcast that you mentioned that you, for those of our listeners who are more interested in hearing, hand analysis and things like that, that you even have, free stuff available on Upswing. All it takes is someone's email, right? Can you
Correct. So
let them know?
So I put up a video you talked a bit about earlier, where I talk about my thoughts on the Negreanu's game. I break down a bunch of different spots that I thought he played well or poorly, and a couple of different hands that I thought were especially telling, sort of in the spots that I thought that maybe he could work on, or where I saw some weaknesses. And then I also posted a video on Upswing where I took the first session that we played, and I just did a review. Basically, I went through all the big pots from that session and talked about it's my actual footage. It's me playing my RNG up. This is what I clicked on, and basically show all my decisions in all these different spots and talk about them. And I actually ran a sim on one of them as well to kind of discuss a monotone board spot that was interesting. But yeah, so that's for free. Basically, on Upswing, all you have to do is sign up with your email, and then in the Upswing Lab, which is our membership, I'm going to be putting in a bunch of different videos of footage from the challenge. I think at some point I'm going to do my probably top bluffs. I might put that one together. The problem is there's just so much footage. It's so many hours that I have to go through a lot of bluffs and a lot of hands and a lot of hours. But at some point we'll probably put something together like that too. There'll be a lot of good stuff that I think our members are going to enjoy and can take away a lot from.
Well, and I think it's a really interesting spot, and lucky for our listeners and for anyone who finds it for lots of reasons. But obviously, for most players, they are not wanting to give away exactly the leaks or things that they found playing against other players. But for Doug, who really has no interest in staying, deep in this poker game, I think we're getting a really juicy insight and some really great information. So you guys definitely want to check that out. And regardless of what you do, I hope you'll keep us posted on @DougPolkVids.
I will definitely do that.
Okay,
That's
good.
correct.
Thank you so much, Doug. Well, one of the things I was thinking about as I was, sort of resonating on that interview and on Doug's perspective was how exciting it is for someone, he basically said that 2014, 2015, he felt like Heads Up No Limit really died. In a lot of ways, most of the people who were playing were already a part of his, stable, if you will. He moved on, tried some other things, but for him to say that he feels like that space is sort of again up and running and firing, and that there's definitely more of a buzz. And I think, Jeff, we've talked about this a little bit. Chad, we've talked about that the Heads Up No Limit high stakes world is kind of happening again. And I think that's, I hope, indicative of poker as a whole. Maybe.
I would think so. Like you just said, Sarah, and like we've said throughout the last couple months, the market is there, at least from a viewer's perspective. And it does seem like some of the players, some of the high stakes crushers are almost inspired by this Heads Up challenge. We have another challenge already set that could lead us into the next thing that we talk about, Landon Tice versus Bill Perkins. Everybody's just coming out of the woodwork and they're offering challenges. Phil Hellmuth is the returning champion of High Stakes Duel. Now that's high stakes Heads Up in a tournament format and a sit and go format, but he's going to come on Poker Go and he's going to battle some of the top names in the poker world. He has challenged Daniel Negreanu. He has challenged Doug Polk as well. So I think we're going to see a ton of this content over the next year or so, especially before live poker comes back in full force. Everybody's been captivated and drawn to these Heads Up online challenges, and I see no reason why it won't continue in the future. And hopefully more challenges will incorporate more views of Cards Up coverage. I think that would help these challenges moving forward, and they won't, we won't tire out with them if we get to see more of the hands.
Amen. I'm definitely on board with that. And actually, that's, I think, something that Daniel and Doug had spoken about when they talked about maybe doing some different formats, maybe not just No Limit Hold'em. The general consensus was, if we're going to do Cards Down, we've got to give the people No Limit Hold'em, because Cards Down is hard enough as it is. Well, we have definitely seen some really exciting stuff within the confines of the United States in the last few weeks. There's been a lot of buzz regarding, sports betting, and hopefully riding on the coattails of that would be online poker. We spoke, I think last week it was, about Michigan, and this week there was some news leaked that GG Poker may or may not be approved in Pennsylvania. Is that confirmed now, Chad? Is that legit?
Yeah, actually, the Pennsylvania Gaming Board had a meeting today. The call was just a couple hours ago from when we are recording this, and it did pass. They got the necessary approval, and so GG Poker has clearance for launching in Pennsylvania. Now, this is still very early. They're not going to just flip a switch and all of a sudden they be in Pennsylvania. There has been no testing of any sorts. There's really been no other news. It's just that, all right, the road is clear now for GG Poker to be in Pennsylvania, which marks its first foray into the United States, which is quite exciting. GG Poker is a big player in the online space, and so now that they have a the door is open into the United States, so to speak, it'll be interesting to see if they can parlay that into operations in New Jersey, Nevada, Michigan, as you just mentioned. So still early, but certainly very exciting news out of Pennsylvania.
I wore my GG Poker hoodie just for this very important announcement. GG is here. GG is in the US. As Chad said, the plan is not for GG to just come into Pennsylvania and be like, okay, yeah, we're good. We're fine with just Pennsylvania. With the Wire Act ruling from a couple weeks ago, the door is open for interstate online poker. I know that our friends at Poker Fuse had an interview with 888 Poker, and 888, who operates WSOP.com, they said they hope to be up and running in Pennsylvania by the time the World Series starts in the summer. So we could see bracelet events with Nevada and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and potentially Michigan. So the next couple months are going to be big. The next year is going to be big for online poker in the US. And I'm really, really excited to see what GG has to offer in that next year.
Well, unfortunately, I know where they won't be, and that's Texas. So
yeah, going to be a while before you see them in Texas, Sarah. Going to be a while.
I was kind of sad to see that. I thought Texas, we were going to just jump right on board, but apparently they gave the boot to legalize sports betting here recently as well. So womp to that. But in the spirit of GG finally being on US soil, let's just take the time to hear a very quick ad from them.
GG Poker continues to revolutionize online poker with exclusive new games and features that set it apart from the opposition. Play at neck-breaking speed on the site's exciting spin and gold jackpot sit and go events and win big, or grind it out in the weekly $300,000 guaranteed GG Masters. You guys will not want to miss out on the GG Poker bonuses. You can get either $100 in cash and free tickets, or 100% match bonus up to a maximum of $600. You guys definitely do not want to miss out on their match deposit bonus. You can check that out on PokerNews.com. Be sure to search GG Poker bonus on PokerNews.com.
While we were just listening to that ad, guys, I had a very quick moment of remembering. I'm very, very excited to announce that supposedly today, my gaming table is arriving. My gaming table / dining room table. I am totally over the moon about this. I'm going to make a video about it as soon as I get it and get it all put up and put together. But for those who are listening, if you're into games, if you are into gaming, even board games is one thing, but if you go to if you're more interested in just poker, you can go to BBO Poker Tables and they can customize amazing tables for you. But if you're into the board gaming space, this is legit the best table I've ever seen. I've been shopping for a gaming table for probably the last year. I wanted to customize my new house with a cool table. This is legit the one. You can put a tabletop on it, make it a dining table, cover the game you're playing, pull the dining table back off. You can get it in a bunch of different colors, but I got it in that gray stone, which is very obviously on trend right now. And I'm just super, super thrilled to get it. But it was originally, the MSRP is around $2,300, which is definitely out of my budget, maybe not out of a lot of poker players' budgets, but until February 19th, they're running a Kickstarter campaign. If you donate, or I'm not sure exactly what the proper vernacular is, but if you donate prior to February 19th to the Kickstarter campaign, you can get the table for around $1,500. So you have until February 19th to lock it up. I had a lot of people reach out to me. They can ship to the EU, UK, and Canada. If you're one of our listeners over there and want to check it out, tell you guys this is a smoking deal and you should check it out.
Is this a Heath construction project or a Sarah construction project?
You know what? If I let Heath do it, we just get in a big fight like every time. So I should probably just do it myself. We'll see. I was watching a video about how to put it all together. But I'm not in the best physical condition, as we know, my
pregnancy,
belly is growing. So we'll have to see, but it might end up being like just a small fight. Usually if it's constructed in China, it's a really big fight, but this is made in California. So we might end up actually being able to just put something nice together very easily. We will see. But there is a few other important news stories, and we actually have another interview for you guys. And I do want to let you know that next week we're going to get Daniel Negreanu's side of the story. I'm going to talk to him on this coming Friday. So if you guys have questions you want me to ask Daniel, please go ahead and shoot them to me at Auntie Chardonnay, or you could also get at Jeff Platt or at Chad A. Holloway. Okay, so this is something that I didn't hear about, but I noticed in the rundown, Jeff, drama between Terrence Chan and Mike McDonald. Please, someone give me the scoop.
Well, we said next heads up challenge is pretty much set for Landon Tice against Bill Perkins. And so Mike McDonald and the good people at PokerShares, of course, they're going to put up a line as it pertains to that challenge. Now, I think it's important to note right off the bat that the agreement for this very challenge, Landon Tice would be giving up 9 big blinds per 100 hands. That amounts to $720,000. So it's almost like that's Bill Perkins' head start, or that's what he gets at the end, no matter how you want to look at that. And so Perkins just has to, effectively lose by $719,000 or less in this challenge to be the winner of the challenge. So when PokerShares put the line up, they put them at effectively even odds. Like it's effectively a flip. Which side do you want? We're going to take a little juice. They're both minus 109, minus 110. What they did not put was the details of the challenge. And Terrence Chan, co-host of the Dat Poker podcast, he's clicking around on PokerShares. He sees that they're minus 109 on each side, and he's thinking, Landon Tice is a significantly better player than Bill Perkins. Why would they be kind of even odds? He says that he asked a couple friends about this, and he went ahead and fired off on Landon Tice's side, which he thought was very sharp. Long story short, he comes to find that the details of the challenge are enacted by PokerShares, and that him taking Landon Tice basically said, okay, I have Landon minus $720,000 because that's how much he's favored by. Terrence was not thrilled with that. Now, to PokerShares' credit, they said, if you didn't understand, you can withdraw the bet, you can take back the bet, but if you want the bet to stand, keep in mind that you have it at the line that is set in the challenge of 9 big blinds per 100 hands, or $720,000. PokerShares was, very nice, very professional about it. Mike McDonald, the boss man over at PokerShares, sent Terrence an email, a DM, I should say, and just said, "Are you dumb?" And that kind of started this drama between them. Terrence called out PokerShares and Mike McDonald on Twitter for not accepting his bet at just dead even. He says, you guys didn't post anything about it. You guys didn't say that this would include the line. You just said, here was the challenge. Do you want Landon or do you want Bill Perkins? And then Terrence fired off on Landon Tice. So, I won't get into all the tweets because it would take us forever, but it's basically Mike McDonald saying, hey, we said this is the heads up challenge. So included in that is all the terms of the challenge. It's Terrence saying, hey, it's on you guys to at least say somewhere where I place the bet, this is effectively a minus $720,000 line. So that's where we're at.
I just, it leaves me shaking my head a little bit, and not the bet itself. I'm fine with that drama aspect of it. Like, okay, they forgot to put it there. Seems like an easy fix. I kind of just take issue with taking the line of "Are you dumb?" as your first opening, your opening line. And it's just when you do that, when you say that to somebody, when you approach the situation like that, you're just asking for drama or, a disrespectful situation. There's not going to be usually an amicable situation when you start out in such a manner. So I certainly think that there could have been a lot more tact used on, Timex's part in that. And, knowing Terrence, listening to the Dat Poker podcast quite a bit, I can understand why he took offense to that. And then, he took it to the public forum, and now we've got this whole mess. And unfortunately, it seems like, even if they do come to terms or things kind of settle down, I'm sure that friendship will be, hurt for a long, long time, maybe irreparably. So Yeah, it's unfortunate all around. I think that it could have been handled better by Timex and PokerShares as far as how they dealt with Terrence, and I think that was the real issue that Terrence took with this. As far as the bet itself, I chalk it up to kind of, I'm a shit happens kind of guy at times. Like, okay, they had an overlook. It's kind of common sense that it should have been there. That's part of the bet. So you can either take the bet under those terms, or we'll just cancel it out. Nobody's hurt too much. If they wanted to, they could have done like Terrence said, like an Isai Scheinberg did with PokerStars, and say, look, we messed up. We'll still honor it because, we want to treat the players right. But they're not obligated to do that. It is in the terms and conditions and whatnot. So, yeah, it was just one of those like, man, oh boy, here we go. A little more Twitter drama.
Right.
They got to keep us afloat for the week. So,
and it does seem like it is ending because, as Terrence tweeted, I'm going to step away from this conversation for a little while. I spent the morning doing a lousy job parenting and paying more attention to people on the internet saying mean things about me than being attentive to my kid, and that's absolutely unacceptable. Further screenshots of my conversations won't be forthcoming. That's what Mike McDonald had asked for, because there's too much cross chatter that reveals identities, and editing it out defeats the purpose. Since I think something good should come of this, here's this screenshot. It's not 20K, but at least it's real. It's a $1,000 donation to charity. He says, I'll admit I've made mistakes and said some things I shouldn't have said. I'm still absolutely grossed out. People are saying I angled, but defending myself is costing me more emotional energy than I have. So I'm letting this one go and imposing a temporary self-Twitter ban. And Mike McDonald says, if I'm ever caught as a liar or a scammer, I plan to take a nice break from the public eye to focus on my parenting and philanthropy. So Terrence was kind of letting this one go, and Mike was kind of like, how about one more jab on your way out?
Dude, oh my gosh, so many things. But first of all, I was thinking exactly the way they handled it is what I would say is the only fair way really to handle it. Okay, you didn't understand what was going on in this, which whether or not that's your due diligence or the site's due diligence, like, they just said, okay, mistakes, take your money back. That seems to make sense to me. And somewhere in there, starting the conversation with "Are you dumb?" does not really sound right to me. I feel like there's more to this conversation probably than just that it started with "Are you dumb?" I might be wrong. I actually really love Terrence, and I think I have like more of a personal relationship with him than I do with Mike McDonald. But I have a lot of respect for Mike McDonald, and I don't see him as someone who's just mean or nasty, generally speaking. So somehow I feel like we're missing parts of the story. It's probably a little bit more in the middle for both of them. But and
maybe they were friends too, right? And that's why Mike could lead with that kind of a message. Like if Chad texted me and be like, hey, he was like, hey, Landon and Bill are dead even. And I would say, are you dumb? But if somebody I didn't know tweeted that at me, I'd be like, no, there's actually a line included, blah, blah, blah. So maybe they have a bit of a past relationship that it perhaps allowed Mike, at least in his mind, to start the conversation with that line.
Jeff, when I approach you, it's always, dear sir, how are you today?
Right.
I am fine. Very cordial.
Very professional.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I hope they work it out, but God bless the poker world that there's always at least something we can have an opinion about.
I think one of the takeaways, like Terrence said though too, and I've been there, I know you guys have been there, the drama on social media, on Twitter, can be like a black hole, right? It can just suck you in, and everything else takes a back seat, and it becomes this huge blown out of proportion issue in your own mind. And so kudos to him for being like, you know what, I've invested enough energy into this, it's not worth it, I'm checking out. So I think that was a good move on his part, instead of going down that rabbit hole even further.
Yeah. And also you could even just check out. Like you could even just not make that last post about how you want to like focus on your family and do that. And you could just be like, you know what? I'm just not going to turn on Twitter this morning, and I'm going to like move on with my life. We all know that's the Sarah Herring life, and it gets you nowhere if you're looking for some clout in the poker world. That's for sure. All right. Well, I think this for sure will be a story that Chad should cover. Chad, the inventor of, the brainchild behind the MSPT Poker Bowl. What went down this year? I know who won the Super Bowl, by the way, from social media and from the drama that's been going on regarding the Super Bowl. But who won the Poker Bowl? That's what really matters.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was the inventor, but I certainly had a say when I was working with the MSPT. It was our way of honoring the Amarillo Slim Super Bowl of poker, which we talked about last episode. But this is the 5th year it's been taking place at the Venetian in Las Vegas. The Mid-States Poker Tour, MSPT, partners with them. And basically what it is let's have a great tournament before the NFL Super Bowl. Let's have it finish on Saturday so that players can watch the big game on Sunday. And so that was what was happening at the Venetian here earlier in the month, and the $1,100 buy-in main event got 908 entries. It ended up being a super long day 2, I think like 15 hours before a 4-handed deal was struck, and coming out on top as part of that deal was Johnny Oshana out of San Jose, California, $130,000, and then Jordan Christos, a well-known poker pro, finishing runner-up for almost $120,000. So some nice 6-figure scores there. Another well-run event at the Venetian. Now, that number would have been even bigger. It has been bigger in the past for this particular event, but giving the restrictions, giving the pandemic and COVID, the space limitations, even despite all that, it got 908 runners, which is just very impressive. And they've got a WPT event coming up, a $5,000 buy-in main event coming up in March at the Venetian, and that one should be pretty big as well. Certainly looking forward to that one. And then, little side note, the MSPT is going to be honoring and bringing back, and I don't know the details quite yet about everything, but there used to be an event called the U.S. Poker Open, the United States Poker Championship. There is a U.S. Poker.
Yeah,
Open,
right.
Yeah, with Poker Go. There used to be the United States Poker Championship. It was part of the Atlantic City scene. Actually, Donald Trump and I think the Trump Taj Mahal back in the 90s launched this event, and I think it ran through like 2009, but then fell off the face of the planet. And so the MSPT has one on their schedule. It's tentatively scheduled from in September, rather. Where it's going to be, we don't know yet, but according to the site, it says it's a $500,000 guaranteed. And I have spoken with the owner of the MSPT, my old boss. We still keep in touch. And I had a program, like a magazine program from the first ever United States Poker Championship. So I sent that along to him so he can, get some ideas or inspiration from it. But I'm certainly very excited. As somebody who loves that poker history, I'm excited to see this event come back. Even if it's kind of a little different than what it was back in the 90s and 2000s, it'll still be cool to see that name recognition once more.
Okay, sidebar, guys, if we just go slightly back, because I was just scrolling Mike McDonald's Twitter, his most recent tweet is that if you think he's an a-hole, you should go deposit money on Run It Once, because it's the most ethically run gambling site out there. And I think this is a very interesting approach to take, but I thought when I saw that, it was the perfect time for us to say, you know what, we also love Run It Once. And if you love PokerNews, you should sign up to play on Run It Once using our code once.run/PNPod. Give it a listen.
Run It Once is a brand new online poker site founded by poker superstar Phil Galfond, who has the player's experience at heart. Run It Once plans to make online poker fun and less predatory while providing ample rewards and innovative features at the same time. All new Run It Once players who download the software via PokerNews are entitled to a 100% deposit bonus worth up to €600. What makes this welcome bonus unique is that you can make as many deposits as you like for that first 30 days after your first deposit. This makes it perfect for those players who do not want to or cannot deposit $600 in one chunk. Be sure to check it out at once.run/PNPod. That's once.run/PNPod.
Over the weekend, while America was glued to its Super Bowl screens, of course, a lot of poker players were glued to their own screens. And if you were paying attention to what was going down on GG Poker, it was basically just Sami Kelopuro crushing everything.
Yeah, it was Sami Kelopuro. Maybe you know him as Lars Luzak, an online legend, winning the High Rollers Blade Bounty King PLO for more than $30K, winning the High Rollers Blade PLO for another $27K, not the Bounty King version, and winning the High Rollers Sunday Blade Closer for $55,000. That is 3 separate tournaments, 3 separate wins for Sami Kelopuro. just an absolute sicko with some stacked fields, just beating some incredible competition. So a decent Sunday, I would say, for the Finn.
It's so interesting to me because when I first came into poker, so we're talking like 2010 maybe, I remember interviewing Sami several times, and at the time he was playing mostly like nosebleeds online, in Heads Up No Limit, and talking to him about, making these crazy like 5-bet, 6-bet shoves, and I just remember thinking, wow, this guy's such a boss. Like he gives zero Fs about just like money or swings or anything. And it's so interesting to me that so many of the Scandies who had this reputation or who were doing this, I think, 10 years ago, are now all in PLO. It makes sense to me that they can handle the swings, that they're not afraid of, taking these big gambly spots. But I just cannot understand, what is it about this Nordic lifestyle that makes you ready to just gamble? Like, what is it about these Swedes and Finns? And I mean, I don't understand. It's so clearly specific to that region, and whatever they have, I want it.
Yeah, they're playing like the smallest edge imaginable. But if they see an edge, then they're going to play that edge, and they realize that variance is going to take its toll. But in the long run, they are going to be profitable because they are the best that this game has to offer. It's an admirable effort, and to be, kind of emotionally even keeled is really, really impressive.
I need it. I want some of that in my life. I've got the genetics there somewhere. I just gotta really get into my roots. Chad, you conducted the last interview of our show. You want to just tee it up for us?
Yeah, we mentioned it last week. We talked about the Best Bet Jacksonville Winter Poker Open Series. They had a $2,000 main event at 510 runners, and coming out on top was one Scott Stewart for $178,000. Now, Scott Stewart might not be the biggest name in the poker world, but it's certainly a name those of us involved in the circuit reporting, at least, are very familiar with. He is always traveling, always winning. He's a 5-time WSOP circuit ring winner. He has I think off the top of my head, 6 runner-up finishes and 4 third-place finishes. So he has come close to winning even more rings. He had this great victory. He almost made the WSOP main event final table a couple years ago, almost made the final table of the PSPC down there in the Bahamas. So this is just a guy who's on the grind. He has got $2 million in live earnings. And I just thought, more people need to know about Scott Stewart. We know about him. He's a fun guy. He's a great guy, the sort of guy you can sit down and have a beer with. So after he won the Best Bet Jacksonville Winter Poker Open main event, I reached out to him and said, hey, man, I think it's time. Let's get you on the podcast. And he was kind enough to take some time out of his day to chat. Here he is. All right. I am joined by our guest this week. Somebody actually seen you, Scott Stewart. You're my guest. I actually seen you right before quarantine. You were one of the last people I seen. It was at Thunder Valley when the Thunder Valley in California, the WSOP circuit was happening. It was one of the last live events, and you were at the final table of the main event there.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. It feels like it was so long ago, but it wasn't even a year at this point. Or I guess it was a year at this point. But yeah, I guess the whole calendar year seemed like a very long year.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. This pandemic has distorted time because it seems like forever ago that tournament took place. But like you said, only about a year ago. One of the reasons we're having you on the show is because there was a more recent tournament, some live poker is coming back into the industry. And one of those was the Best Bet Jacksonville Winter Poker Open that took place down there in Florida. It had 11 events, including a $2,000 main event, 510 runners, a $918,000 prize pool. And you came out on top for $177,000. So let's just start right there. How did it feel to take that tournament down?
I mean, it felt good. It felt good to be playing live poker again. And I guess I've been a little locked up in Southern California here, where we're a little more strict on the COVID rules for, I guess, good reason. But how long is too long? And that's actually the first flight I've been on it was like middle January. I flew down to Florida, with the new COVID rules and everything. But I mean, Florida's the place to be right now for poker, for pretty much anything. It's not many times a year I get to say the weather's better somewhere than Southern California, but it was better in Fort Lauderdale for the week. I guess I was there for 2 weeks, and then up in Jacksonville, the weather was a little cooler, but it was still nice.
I wanted to ask, a lot of players are out there who are kind of scared to go out and play live, or maybe not comfortable with it. And like you said, you were locked up in California where they are a little more strict. What was the whole experience like? Did you feel comfortable? Do you think that, you know, the venues that you played at did a good job of alleviating any concerns? And, you know, what would you share with others who might be hesitant to go out and play live right now?
I think the protocols are doing a pretty incredible. Down in Jacksonville, they didn't have the plexiglass, but still, anytime basically anyone busts out of a seat or someone gets moved to the table, they come over, they spray it down the chair, they wipe down everything. You know, everyone's got to wear a mask. Even the dealers are pretty strict about, hey, make sure the mask is over your nose unless you're eating or drinking, which not too many people are eating not too many people eating at the table now because it's COVID times. But I felt safe. It was an adjustment, but overall I felt safe, and I think the staff, they did a really good job. They were really on it. You know, it's kind of a floor's job just to walk around and make sure the tournament's running smoothly, but now they're just kind of running around cleaning more and more at every moment. So I think if you're a little weary about going out and playing poker, they are taking the safety measures because, one, they want you to come back and feel safe, and also they, you know, if they're not doing the proper things, then one, someone's going to crack down on them, or people are going to blow them up on social media or wherever
Right.
it is, and you know they're not going to get the players back. Which if anybody's following the poker world out there, based on the numbers in Jacksonville and in South Florida, everyone is ready to play poker.
Yeah, the numbers for these live events have been impressive. There's obviously a demand, and I want to talk about some more of your results. But before I do, I want to take it back to the beginning. You know, I've known you on the circuit. I've covered you for many years now. But what's kind of your poker origin story? You know, where did you come from? How did the game come into your life?
I guess I'm right in that age group. I'm just turned 33 this year, and back in the Moneymaker days, I feel like when it started being aired on TV, I mean, it might have been 2002, 2003. I can't fathom how old I was then. But we started playing with friends in high school. It's like a buddy, you know, a good friend of mine invited me to a home game, and he was like, yeah, there's, I don't know, 15, 16 of us in a garage, and they had two tables, one upstairs, one downstairs. And it was like, I was in. Like the first time, I think I got third in a $5 buy-in, and I got my money back for $10 or something. I was like, oh, this is so much fun. I gotta say, I was a sophomore, junior in high school, and it was just like, oh, getting buddies together, have a couple beers, and you play a game that I guess I wasn't too familiar with. I learned that day, but you know, before that, my dad used to have some of his friends over and just play poker they had a card table at the house when I was real young. So I guess the game and between, like, you know, bantering, arguing, shouting, screaming, drinking, it all just intrigued me, and right away I fell in love.
I'm looking over your Hendon Mob right now. Your first tournament cash, according to the Hendon Mob, is from 2004 in San Jose. It looks like a couple $150 tournaments at the local casino. One of them was for third place for $2,200. And like, I remember when I was first learning to play the game, to win $2,200 would have been a kind of a fun feeling.
That is not me. Okay, so the San Jose thing is not me. I don't know who that is. There's a couple different Scott Stewarts. I know there's a Scott Stewart that lives in Florida. There's a Scott Stewart that lives in Colorado. There might even be another one in California. But the 2000, because in 2004 was 17 years ago, so that'd be, I wasn't 21 yet. I don't think I was 18 yet. So that was not me. I don't know when my first cash was. If you were looking on there,
what about? It says here in 2009 there was an Ultimate Bet Aruba Championship event, 22nd for $16,000. Was that one you?
That was me. That's crazy that was my first cash. I had a lot of chips in that tournament. I went 2 years in a row to that Ultimate Bet Aruba trip, and it was like, I guess that's part of the reason I fell in love with traveling right there. It was back in the day when I was playing a lot of online on Ultimate Bet, Absolute, PokerStars, Full Tilt, all the fun stuff back in the day. I qualified 2 years in a row. The first year I was 20 years old, so being in Aruba, you can drink at 18. It was like going to Aruba on a free trip and a $5,000 buy-in. I was familiar with live poker, but I wasn't that great back then. I guess anybody's new at, but I didn't know that was my first cash, and that was like a blast. I had a total blast.
Yeah, and then you went on to have some successes shortly thereafter. In 2014, in December, you won your first WSOP circuit ring. You got one in January right away, and now you're a 5-time circuit ring winner, which is certainly impressive. Do you have any of those rings? Like, is there one more meaningful victory of the other 5, or are they all pretty similar in stature for you?
I guess the first one's special. It was like I was actually working right before then, maybe like a month before that. I was selling cars here in Southern California, and I had a cushy job where I was selling Buicks and GMCs, and then I took a job where I was like promised more money at a BMW in Long Beach where I live, and it just didn't work out. Like the money wasn't there, and I remember I drove in one day, and like I don't know, we were all standing outside trying to sell a car, and I just went into my boss, was like, "This is not for me. I quit." Like it's just one of those. And that month after, it was the first ring I won was in Southern California, which is one of those kind of series I missed. They don't have a circuit there anymore. They don't have any tournaments there, but that's only an hour and 15 minutes away from me. And I really like that venue. They have a really cool pool, and it's a smaller casino, but it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it was cool to win the first one because that kind of like kickstarted my poker career.
It's been quite the career. Just in the WSOP circuit alone, it's an impressive resume. You've got 5 rings, as I mentioned, and looking over more results, you have 5 runner-up finishes. So, but a couple different cards going a different way. Maybe you've got 10 rings or even more, because you also have, it looks like, 3 third-place finishes, 3 fourth-place finishes, 2 fifth-place finishes, and 4 sixth-place finishes. We won't even get to 7th and 8th. But I mean, man, you're always putting yourself in a position to win, it seems.
Yeah, I think early on when I was starting to play more and more live, I was either at the final table or I didn't make the money. It's just as simple as that. I had one speed. I didn't know as much to change gears. I was good when I had a big stack, but it took more time than it should have taken to play like a 10 to 25 big blind stack. If I had over 50 bigs, I feel like I could have crushed, especially those kind of fields in the circuit. But I think that's why I have so many like higher tier finishes, because even going into the final table, I don't think I have, until the last couple of years, I don't think I have as many teens finishes I would like min cash or make the final 6. Which is back then it's a game lead for sure. I needed to get better, and I think I've gotten a lot better since then. But yeah, it is funny. It's like a lot of people say like, wow, you have a lot of like top 4 finishes. I'm like, yeah, I don't really have like the 6th through 13th finishes. I just don't have it.
Well, one that you do that falls in that range actually came at the last World Series of Poker Live in 2019. It's the closest you've come to a bracelet. You finished 10th in event number 28, $1,000 no limit hold'em buy-in event. Now, I know circuit grinders, like a bracelet's got to be top of your list, right? And so, do you hope to win one day? And then kind of what was it like to, that's the closest that you've came thus far. I have no doubt that you'll get even closer or even get one day, but go talk me through what it was like to be right there flirting with that final table.
I remember that tournament very specifically because when we were getting down to the nitty gritty, I had a lot of chips in going most of the tournament. And then around 20, let's say 25-ish, I started to dwindle a little, and then was in that, let's call it 15 to 30 big blind range, even more like 15 to 25. And, I was keeping a close eye on the other table, and I forget who won that. The guy that won that tournament had all the chips on the other table and was just destroying the table shorthanded. And I remember when the person busted in 11th, they busted from the other table, and I made the dealer hold up and said, hey, we're at 10, we're going to combine to one table. And then whoever the floor was came over like, oh, no, keep dealing. I'm like, no, we're at 10. We're combining, and like, oh, it's a new WSOP rule. At 10 players, we're going to play 5 and 5 until we get to 9. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, it's not the best situation for me when I'm somewhat short. I think I had 15 or 16 big blinds at the time. And like after getting that information, the next hand I shoved small blind with like ace 6 or something, ran into ace king with 15 bigs, and I was like, okay, well that, damn it. I remember that specifically when we didn't combine to 10. It was, I don't think 10 is a WSOP final table, but I wanted to combine because I was short and didn't want to play short-handed.
Sure.
So I specifically remember that. So that was a close call, though. That I don't really have a lot of success in the World Series of Poker during the summer. For whatever reason, this summer just is nagging, grueling, whatever it is. I have some min catches, but that was my closest one that I come to. I thought I had a shot when there was, let's say, 30, 40 people up, and kind of looking around the room, and the people I played with, I thought I had a good shot, but that was 10th is always a brutal place to finish.
Well, I want to talk about another deep run that you did have at the WSOP from 2017 in the main event, right? That's got to be something special. Now that got 7,221 runners. It's the year that Scott Bloomstein took it down. You finished 13th in that tournament for $535,000. I know it's on my bucket list to go deep in the main event. It's got to be a hell of an experience to go deep, exciting, fun, but to come that close to the final table has also got to be a little disappointing. What was that whole experience like?
That experience was great. I've played the main event, I think 10 times at this point in my life, at least 10, and I've only cashed it one time, which seems unlikely, but it happens. I've made day 3 a couple times and not made the money. So it's first making the money was a great feeling, and then when I had so many chips in that tournament for most of the tournament, and I think that tournament is really just table draw. If you have a good table draw, you can do really well. Obviously the cards have a lot to do with it, but it's the players you're playing. And I remember playing 4 days of that tournament. On the 5th day when I sat down and we played one orbit, I go, okay, this is when the real tournament starts. Everyone knows how to play. There was no one left that you're like, oh yeah, I got a good run of cards and I made it. It was, I don't know how many people were left on day 5, but I remember sitting down and going, okay, here we go. And then I want to say day 5, 6, and 7 were somewhat of a blur, but I think it was just because you had to be so mentally focused on the game and thinking situations out a little more because you don't get 2-hour levels anywhere else in the world. It's a one-of-a-kind tournament, and if you play any kind of poker tournaments, the strategy changes when you can say, okay, don't get in these kind of spots because you've got 2 hours to be patient and wait. Obviously, some of the more aggressive players make big stacks and like stuff like that, but that experience was incredible. I remember being real in the zone, I guess I'd say, after the 5th day, I feel like I did good, and then day 6 and day 7, it was. I don't think I was ever nervous because adrenaline kind of brought me through, and then also I was mentally exhausted at the end of those days. Like after day 5 and day 6, I know some people say, "Oh, I'm so excited I couldn't sleep." As soon as I got back to the room, it was like take a shower and then go to bed, and I was just dead tired. So, but yeah, it was. And even day 6, I do remember I had a couple of people at the table that we were joking around, having a good time. That it kind of eased the tension up pretty good. So.
You mentioned table draw, and that's kind of a segue into the next tournament I want to talk about. It's actually one I got to play in, and I would deem it the tournament in poker history where table draw was the most important thing. And that was the PokerStars PSPC in the Bahamas, where it was this 25K mix of pros who bought in and qualifiers who won their way a platinum pass in a variety of different ways. So you had people who won a platinum pass for a 25K who had never played in a live tournament before, who did it via Twitter or a free roll and things like that. And that's why I say in this tournament that table draw was so important, because if you were at a stacked final table with pros, that sucks. If you're at a table with 3 qualifiers who have never played in a tournament buy-in bigger than $100, that's pretty juicy. And my table ended up being, I think, pretty tough. I made it to the end of day one, didn't bag. That was my experience. A lot of fun, but you had a much better one because you made a deep run. You finished in 17th place for just over $200,000. Talk us through a little bit about what it was like playing in that PSPC.
That tournament was one of a kind. It was special. I feel like I had an okay table draw day one. It was, everyone knew somewhat how to play poker. No one was too crazy. No one was a total amateur. I did play with a Platinum Pass winner who didn't speak really much English, and it was kind of funny. The day one I guess everyone was being friendly after you played for a couple hours, and that guy that didn't speak much English was really funny. He was kind of out of it half the day, and no one could really understand him, and he spoke broken English. I don't remember what country, but it was from, and he said, "Oh, well, discoteca last night, too much alcohol." It was so funny. And I think he was on cloud nine, getting a Platinum Pass, getting to go to the Bahamas, which I'm sure he's never been before. But that tournament specifically, I do remember I had a pretty good day one, and then day two was like I had a table draw, and then halfway through day two, for lack of a better way to say it, I kind of knitted it up. That chips just kind of dwindled away, and at the end of the day, it was like my table got really, really tough. And I can remember some of the people at the table too. Jake was there. What's the guy that streamed? Jamie. What's his last name?
Jamie Staples.
Yes, Jamie Staples at my table, and then it started being like Timothy Adams came in, and he had chips, and like all these people. I was like, okay, everyone can play now. It was one of those things, and I don't want to say I bagged a lot of chips, but I think after day two, you were somewhat close to the money. And then day three came along and I did not, like, I had no chips. I remember thinking, okay, this is the ultimate tournament I want to min cash in. Even though it was just getting your buy-in back. Like, just cashing for 25 grand it's a big bubble. So I do remember that bubble taking longer than normal, as it should have, because it's a one-of-a-kind tournament. But the bubble took so long and I had 8 or 9 bigs. So making the money was great, and then kind of went on a run. And I can't remember how many days. I think it was the 4th day when I busted, but it was like it was such a cool tournament, and I'll never forget that tournament for the reason that when the pay jumps started happening, and they shot clocks, which they had to do, but I've never been that kind of person to tank for pay jumps, and I guess I think it kind of ruins tournaments the way, you know, some people tank and do things
Right.
like that. But when you got deeper in that tournament and everyone was kind of using their clock down to 1, because the next pay jump it went from 10,000 and it was 15,000, it was 20,000, 27,000. You're like, okay, maybe this pay jump is going to, you know, each pay jump could be life-changing money to a lot of people. You know, even for me, 25 to 30 grand is 25 to 30 grand. That's going to go a long way. So that tournament was special. I think they did a great job. I was excited in 2020 to go back for the one in Barcelona. I was a little bummed that didn't happen, obviously, because of coronavirus. But I think if they ran that tournament every year, it would slowly get more players than I think they had 1,049. I don't know why that number sticks with me, but I think they would get more and more players to go to that tournament every year, just based on how good the tournament was and how unique it was.
I agree with you. That was a very special tournament. That's why I wanted to play it as opposed to just reporting it. I knew it just had this special energy, and I certainly do hope to see it return, post-pandemic. Let's finally talk about then the most recent win. You know, you got off to a pretty good start here in 2021. Let me go back to your profile here real quick, because even before the win at the Best Bet Jacksonville, you had a couple good scores. Here we go. You had right away in the beginning, your first cash 2021 was $6 and $1,000 buy-in WPT Lucky Hearts Poker Open for $21,000. You then finished 17th in that Lucky Hearts Poker Open main event for $33,000, and then you go and win this Best Bet Jacksonville Winter Poker Open main event for $177,000. So a great start to 2021, to say the least.
Yeah. I was excited to go down to Florida. I don't know when I started going to the Seminole in Hollywood, and the new casino looks great. I didn't get to be able to check out the new pool or anything. I did go in the new tower. I went in one of the rooms. They're really nice. But the way they run tournaments down there and the tournament schedule is really favorable. I think they made a little hiccups, and it's like it was a trial and error thing. What's going on? Like even the one that I did good in, I got 6th place in the 1K. It was 30-minute levels, but it was a 1-day tournament. And I just don't think they accounted for the turnout they got. I think it was over 500 players. So we're playing a 1-day 1K with over 500 players. So I want to say I busted it around 3:30 in the morning.
Wow.
In 6th place too. So I was tired, and I was like, man, I don't know when those guys played till. They must have played till 5, 6 in the morning or even later. But it was a great tournament. You know, they've done a lot of things. I think 8-handed is amazing. You know, they had the plexiglass and everything. You just can't beat 8-handed. It's definitely going to be one of those things, I think, when poker really comes back all the way back after playing 8-handed for a little bit. And if they're going to make me play 10-handed, I am not going to want to play 10-handed.
Yeah. Hopefully we've seen, at least the end of that here in the pandemic. And I guess that was going to be my next question then to wrap this up. You're off to a hot start in 2021. What's the plan for the rest of the year? Are you going to look for more opportunities to play live, or, what's poker looking like for you in this new year?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Houston. It's February, so that's like middle of February. I know Justin Hammer's running those tournaments up in Houston. I'm definitely gonna check that out. Just to say that, one, I've played Texas Hold'em in Texas, which we couldn't do for the longest time unless you knew someone to play an underground game or whatever it was. So my parents lived in Houston for 15 to 20 years, and I'm excited to go back, check that out. The weather's pretty decent this time of year, so play some golf, hang out, see what poker in Houston's all about. After that, I'll probably head over to the Venetian, which Vegas is not the most ideal place to be right now because there's so many of the strict rules, and the casinos they're just dead compared to what there used to be. And Vegas being the free for all that it is, it's not like that. Which, again, I understand with Corona, it needs to be those kind of situations. It's just a different feel. But I'll go for that. I think the 5K WPT out there, and I wouldn't mind watching some March Madness out there, because that's one of the big things that got taken away last year. Was March Madness is one of the most fun times of the year for me.
Well, it sounds like you've got a good plan for 2021. I'm certain we haven't heard the last of you. And if poker fans want to keep on top of you, I know you're on Twitter at your boy Stu. That's YA boy, BOY Stu, STU. I follow you, you follow me back. I enjoy keeping on top of your poker adventures and travels. And like I said, I'm pretty confident that you are one of those players who's going to be around for a long time, one of those players who will eventually get a bracelet. And we certainly haven't seen the last of you in the poker world.
I appreciate that. Hopefully bracelets, WPT titles, whatever it is, the more money, the better.
Well, we sure appreciate everybody listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, for watching the podcast. As I mentioned, we have Daniel Negreanu next week. We might also have Vivian Saliba. I'm talking to her. So we might have, again, a double guest podcast next week. And if you guys have questions for Daniel, questions for Vivian, questions for any of us, you can get at us at A&T Chardonnay, at Jeff Platt, at Chad A. Holloway. And yeah, anything else you guys want to add before we let him go?
No, ma'am.
You said it all.
Will say that I'm going to be on The Orbit in like 15 minutes, another podcast in the poker space, relatively new, I think, that I've listened to only 2 episodes, but they were both really good and really interesting. So if you guys want to hear more of just me talking about how hard it is to come up with fun, interesting content, then go ahead and check out this week's episode of The Orbit. And if you're looking for something fun to just giggle about, be sure to watch the Judge with the Cat Filter Zoom call. I was literally peeing last night, just dying. All right, you guys, deuces.
The key to winning big is using every little bit of knowledge to your advantage. At Oddschecker, we give you the edge. Better odds, better picks, and better offers to make you a better bettor. Why settle for less? Quickly compare the odds at every sportsbook to ensure that you're getting the best price to maximize your return. Visit us at www.oddschecker.com/US. Oddschecker. Sports betting smarter.